Hi, everyone joining in. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We will just wait for 5 minutes and let people in before we start. I can see that participants have started joining our call now. Hi, Manish. I see your comment in the question and answer feature. Please know you can also add your questions in the webinar chat. Kara, I'm getting a message from Jody that the chat is disabled. Can you just quickly check?
All set.
It should work now. Stephanie and Jody. Hi, Timothy. Hi, Jody again. Great. Hi, Lior. Okay, we will wait for a few more minutes. Hi, Chase. Hi, Kathleen. We already have such a wonderful and vibrant chat. And it's just so nice to see everybody from different parts of the world. It's just fantastic. Thank you for joining the webinar. I think so. We have quite a good number to start with. Shall we go ahead and start the presentation? I think we should, but just allow me to share the screen first. Elaine, if you can actually share your screen.
Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see it now. So welcome everybody. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. And a very warm welcome to our webinar on the 2022 State of the Industry Report on Next Gen Materials. I'm thrilled to see, as I said before, so many people from all different parts of the world joining our conversation today. My name is Pari Trivedi, and I'm the Chief Communications Officer at MII, and I'll be the host for this event today. Please be informed that for this webinar, we are recording the chat, and we're recording the discussion, and the recorded video will be available to you just after the webinar has ended. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our esteemed presenter for today's webinar, Elaine Siu. Elaine currently serves as the Chief Innovation Officer and leads the innovation program at MII, where she disseminates research data and insights to industry stakeholders and analyzes the state of the next-gen materials industry. She also facilitates connections among startups and investors. Before joining MII, Elaine founded and managed the Good Food Institute Asia Pacific, where she advised startups, corporates, and investors on market trends and business strategies. She has also published industry reports and startup manuals to accelerate the alternative protein industry. With her extensive experience in the field, Elaine is recognized as an expert in the industry, and we are very fortunate to have her as our speaker for today's webinar. In today's webinar, Elaine will give an overview of the industry's trends in the next-gen material space and also talk about the opportunities. At the end of Elaine's presentation, we will have a dedicated Q&A session where she will answer all your questions. We've already started receiving questions, so there's a good amount of questions that Elaine you can look forward to. And to the attendees, please feel free to submit your questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of the Zoom window, and or in the chat, which is on your right side. And we'll do our best to address as many questions as possible during the Q&A session. So please, once again, join me to give a warm welcome to Elaine. And again, welcome to our webinar. Over to you, Elaine. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Perry. That's such a kind introduction. I hope I don't disappoint, but I'm so happy to be here. And I think it's amazing that everybody in the chat are just saying where they're from. And it seems like we have audience from all around the world. That's super exciting. So hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Siu. I'm the primary author of the State of the Industry report, which hopefully a lot of you have seen it sort of over the past few years. It has become an annual signature offering from MII, and it's a great example of the free tools, data, and insights that we put out there for free to basically help the whole next-gen material industry grow and accelerate. And what we try to do with, okay, I'm going to get rid of my photo. Oh, next page. What we try to do with these reports are basically to increase transparency, to fill in any knowledge gaps. We see startups pulling information and graphs from our reports and use them in their pitch decks. By all means, do so. This is what we're doing here to help accelerate the whole industry, to support the story about opportunities and room for growth in this industry. We also want investors who are starting to be interested about this space to kind of get a quick overview and education about what's what, who's who, and hopefully start to pour resources into next-gen materials. So this is the third State of the Industry report we've published, and we sort of have a specific structure and flow to it now. And so I'm going to follow the same flow that we have in that report for this webinar and go through these topics with you in the next 40 minutes or so. And we should have about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So please would love to get into discussion mode, because I know just hearing me present is kind of boring. So looking forward to the end 15 minutes. All right, so we will start with what are next-gen materials, kind of the why, the scope, how we define it, a little bit about the technology around it, just to kind of have that framework. And then we're going to go into the who's who, and mainly the innovators and investors. We might have some time to get into some specific topics and insights, challenges in the industry. And then that would hopefully lead us naturally into discussion, into the Q&A session. Okay, so first, I like to set the scene and the scope, get clear on definitions and some basic concepts, so please bear with me. So quickly, the challenge, the starting point, and the why we're working on next-gen materials. basically conventional animal-derived materials come from animal agriculture. And I think at this point, all of us know, and I won't go into details about industrial animal farming being a leading cause of many of the pressing problems for our world right now, including climate change, environmental degradation, and animal cruelty. So that's the challenge that we're facing. And the solution that we see is next-gen material. These are animal-free, high-performance, environmentally preferred alternative to the incumbent animal-based materials. And just to give you a slide to like get that mental image, images of leather, silk, fur, wool, exotic skins. This is what we're talking about, the animal-based materials. So these are the 6 main subcategories of materials that this report focuses on. And then I'm going to have just 2 slides on more of the science 101. So please bear with me. Now, first of all, let's look at the input categories, like what exactly go into making these next-gen materials. Again, just to kind of slot things so that it's easier to analyze, we also focus on 6 main input categories. And how we do that is basically if something is greater than 50% of content of a material, that's what we call it a main input. So there are plant-derived, mycelium, cultivated animal cells, microbe-derived, recycled materials, and blend. So I'll just go through very quickly like each one to kind of, again, get us into the headspace of what are we talking about? What are these materials? So first of all, plant-derived. I think this is the one that everybody is most familiar with. So that applies to next-gen materials that are derived from whether it's virgin or waste plant matter. We also slot kind of algae and fungi into this category, even though they're not strictly plants, but that's sort of what we call plant derived as a category. And so examples are a lot of what you see in the media, really: grape leather, apple leather, cactus leather. So those are the plant derived examples. The next one is mycelium. Again, that's very much associated with non-animal leather because of the texture. This root-like structure of fungal species is called mycelium, and you can see that it has very specific texture to it. And so mycelium is very much utilized to make non-animal leather. And then we have cultivated animal cells. So this is materials that utilize tissue engineering approaches to grow animal cell constructs, so grow the skin in a lab. And then we have microbe-derived, and this is utilizing cellular engineering approaches such as cell culture or fermentation processes to produce products like proteins and biopolymers that goes into next-gen material formulas. The next 2, recycled and blended, we focus less on that, but recycled material, quite straightforward, basically can be, for example, recycled plastic being used as a main input as a new material. Blend would be basically a mixture or a formulation that would include the other categories that we just mentioned. So that's the main input categories that we've seen being utilized in next-gen materials. Now, this is a conceptual landscape, again, to get us into that headspace of, for example, to make this end product or end material of a next-gen leather. At the top, you can see all these different inputs can go into it, which is what we just mentioned. So it can be micro fermentation on the left, in the middle, biomass. So these can be fruits, plants, fungi, algae, etc. You have recycled plastic here as well. On the right, a living animal cell, and using cell and tissue engineering and growing the skin in a lab. So that's this is the last one to kind of set the scene, which is when we talk about the shift beyond incumbents. So we are starting here with animal-based materials, the incumbents. So the leather, silk, wool, fur, down, and exotic skins that has been around for ages, centuries. We talk about next gen, but there is actually a current gen in the middle, which again, the media loves talking about the current gen. To us, this is not part of what we call next gen. Current gen is the synthetics, basically, which are not, and they are mostly inexpensive petroleum derived materials, and they are used in many, many different areas in life. They're everywhere. They're not only used as animal-based materials alternatives, but they are definitely a current generation of animal-based material alternatives. We are trying to get to next gen, which is high performance, animal-free, but also environmentally preferable. So that's the kind of definition terminologies done. So let's go into talking about the industry. Now, the ecosystem, we separate into 4 main categories of stakeholders. The State of the Industry report mainly focuses on innovation, so the startup, the companies, and investors, the investment environment. But I want to touch on a little bit about brands and scientists here as well. So brands, the role that it plays in the ecosystem is very interesting because next-gen materials are not consumer packaged goods. So, which means it never really directly interacts with the consumer. The gatekeeper to commercialization is what we call industry brands. So think Adidas, Gucci, BMW, IKEA. They sell the end products, they design the end products, but they are the biggest buyers of these raw materials. So to get to market, material innovators need to be able to work with and sell to these brands, and then they together need to figure out how to adopt these novel materials into the existing supply chain. So the machineries, the craftsmen, where are these materials from, where they need to go to, etc. That's going to be covered in another very exciting report that MII will publish later this year, so stay tuned for that. So yeah, I won't touch on that part too much today. Now, the other stakeholder are scientists. So again, MII has a lot of more science-focused reports, so please check it out on our website. Also, this webinar is also relevant to scientific stakeholders because a lot of scientists basically are working in material startups, the CSO, the whole R&D team in material startups. So then we're going to focus on innovators and investors. That's really part of MII's theory of change, which is that to grow a nascent industry that's disrupting an incumbent one, the key is to drive talents and funding towards building this new industry. So talents would be the innovators, the material startups, and funding, obviously, from investors. All right, so let's dive in. The state of the industry. So we're going to dissect these numbers from a few different angles, perspectives to get different insights. Let's first start with looking at the innovators, so the material startups by numbers. To be honest, at the time of the first and second report that we published, tracking the growth of number of new companies formed that are coming into the next gen material space was a big thing for us, because in a really nascent industry that's really just emerging, it's really important for us to track and support the newcomers, because you need to at least have a base of companies existing to disrupt the incumbents. As the industry grow, we are looking more and more to like quality over quantity, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But looking at this 10-year trend of obviously the companies, by the end of 2022, it has grown to just over 100 companies active in this space under our definition of next gen materials. It is important to note, though, that obviously this is not an exhaustive list. And for the latest list of companies, please again go to our website and look at the innovator database there, because that's updated more regularly. Usually after we publish the report, we would get a lot of inquiries, and we would actually know about a lot of new companies through publishing the report. So definitely the most updated list, go to our website and check it out. Also, having tracked material innovators for a few years now, it has become clear to us that many of them actually would choose to stay in stealth mode until they're ready to launch. So again, this list is not exhaustive. There were, as you can see on this chart here, there were 5 ventures formally incorporated in 2022 to bring the number to total number to just over 100 companies. But actually our analysis in this report compared to the last one, we've added 19 startups in here and 4 corporations. These have only emerged over 2022 to publicly disclose their activities in next-gen materials. So yeah, it is really quite a fast-moving space. And very interestingly, 3 corporations have announced that they are developing their own next-gen leather, and they are Gucci, Volkswagen, and Volvo. They all made those announcements in 2022. So other than looking at young startups, we're also looking at corporates actually coming into the game of innovating in material as well. Yeah, but as mentioned, we're now going more of a quality over quantity approach as well, since the market will not shift until these alternatives are truly competitive, at least on par when it comes to aesthetics and performance, and then later price parity. So it is also very exciting to see corporates, so the brands itself, whether like in different capacities, getting more and more involved at the innovation stage, because they are the biggest buyer. They are the biggest user of these materials. So I'm very excited to see them getting really engaged at the R&D, at the innovation phase. Now let's look at the number of companies by category. So what you see in the media is mostly about leather alternatives, but as I just mentioned, at MII, we look at 6 different subcategories, and we want to make sure we highlight the other categories too. So of the 102 companies, the majority, 64 of them, work on biomimicry of animal leather. We have 15 in silk, 10 in wool, 9 in fur, 7 in down, and so forth. So seeing this, over 60% of current players in the industry target on what biomimicking one material, which is leather. I mean, you can read different insights into this, right? What we think is it's obvious that there are white spaces in other categories. Also, there are several ways to look at these other categories. First of all, some of them are really, you can't even argue that they are byproducts of any other industry, like fur, like silk. The other angle of looking at this is something like silk is very expensive. So does that mean that being a high value product, does that enable a faster path to price parity than other commodities? Again, that's another angle to look at these numbers. So yeah, we try to look at these numbers from like dissecting it from different angles to find the white spaces. And we're definitely very excited to support these kind of underserved product categories and to support more new innovation and startups coming into these spaces. And we think they are very attractive to both innovators and investors looking to enter into this industry. All right, the next one, we try to look at the innovators by input. So I think it's not a surprise that the majority of them use plant. So a little over 50% use plant-derived materials as their main input, but we also have close to 20% using micro-derived materials and 9% using mycelium. So, I mean, the feedstock, main input, and technologies employed definitely can have significant impact, not only on the product aesthetic and performance, but also the time and the cost to scale up. And we do dive a little bit more into the scale up issues in this report. And so I won't go into too much of that, but again, it's interesting and exciting to see different technologies allowing company to achieve diverse mimicry and applications. This year, we also added a breakdown of these material companies by country where their headquarters are at. So the United States at the top with 30 companies, the UK with 7. If you group together all the EU countries, it's well over 20. So basically getting close to the number of companies in United States as well. All right, then moving on to investments. Ooh, this was where we got super excited in 2021, where we reported this unprecedented spike in capital invested in next-gen material companies. Well, the year of 2022 represented a more challenging funding environment for not just material innovators, I think across the board, as the world went through an economic downturn. And so next-gen material space was not immune to that adjustment. But then I think looking at the 10-year track from 2013 to 2022, both capital invested and number of deals continue to be in an upward momentum. So yeah, the investment landscape continued to be active in 2022, and a few notable funding includes Michaelworks closed its Series C, Natural Fiber Welding had a Series B, LG Knit had a 15 million Series A funding round led by Collaborative Fund, which is also an investor in both threads, Natural Fiber Welding and Modern Synthesis, which launched a new 200 million climate solution focused fund with Stella McCartney in the year of 2022. We also have cultivated leather startup Vitro Labs, securing a Series A funding of over 47 million. And again, interestingly, investors included global luxury fashion group Kering. So this is all very, very exciting news. Although, yes, compared to 2021, the number basically halved, and I will go a little bit more into that in the next slides. But still, it was all in all, it was a year that a lot of exciting investments happened. Oh, I wanted to mention quickly as well that as of the end of 2022, we are aware of 20 next-gen material startups that are actively fundraising. So if you are an accredited investor, you can get access to active deal information by opting into our investor database. So make sure you sign up on that. Again, the link is on our website, but I'll make sure we'll get it in the chat later on as well. Okay, I'd like to include 2 slides just talking about the top 10 funded companies. You can see more in our reports. I like to showcase their funding history over the years, just because kind of as a nascent industry, identifying the poster children kind of anchors you and give you some perspective to what this scene is like, who are the main players. So for example, here, the top funded company, Spiber, it has long been a top funded company in this space. At the moment, it produces spider silk proteins via precision fermentation, but its technology called brood protein is really versatile, and it's looking into producing other materials and fibers like wool or even sheets like leather. So that's very exciting. you can see all these informations in the report. Again, you can download that for free. So feel free to have a look. The top 10 most funded companies, Spinover actually went public in 2021. Yeah, again, there were quite a few really big deals in 2021, which really boosted the investment numbers there. All right, then let's address the elephant in the room. The matter of the fact is that investment funding did halve from 2021 to 2022 in next-gen materials. I just want to bring in the alternative proteins perspective to give more context to these numbers. So alternative proteins and next-gen materials, the whys behind them are the same. The thesis behind these shifts are very similar. In fact, there are startups working on both alternative proteins, as in the meat, and next-gen material, as in the skin, because they are from the same animal. At the end of the day, it is about reinventing how protein is produced. So looking at the alternative protein scene, very interesting to see the funding in alternative protein also had a decrease of 42% from 2021 to 2022. Although, so overall it's a decline, but it's also worth noting that actually in Asia Pacific, there was a 43% growth, and in Europe, there was a 24% growth. So it seems like a lot of what you see in the media about the dive in alternative protein funding happened in the United States. So how is that kind of relevant to us? Given the way we define next-gen materials, which is the animal-free alternatives, we have been viewing this industry with a keen reference to the alternative proteins industry. And we see this material industry as 5 to 10 years behind alternative proteins, and the wholesale market size will reach 2.2 billion by 2026, which was basically the size of all proteins back in 2019. Now, in 2022, after years of double-digit growth, the plant-based alternative meat market experienced a stagnation. And so it's interesting to look at what does that mean for the material space? What are the similarities or the differences between the two? And according to a study of Deloitte, one of they found that a shift in consumer sentiment around plant-based meat is one of the possible reasons behind a slowing demand. So when we look at the next-gen materials industry, one differentiation point is that the buyers, as we've talked about this a little bit before, are not really the end consumer, but the buyers are companies such as fashion houses and automobile makers. So what the consumer buys is the end product, a bag, a pair of sneakers, or a car, but not a sheet of leather to sew a bag or make a shoe yourself or line the interior of the car yourself. So the decision-making process and the factors to consider are very different from buying a food product. So I think that is a very interesting comparison. And in the next-gen material space, the buyers that are creating the demand more directly are the brands that is Nike, IKEA, Volvo, right? And they purchase materials in thousands of tons per year. And what is important is what drives their demand for shifting from incumbent to next-gen materials. And primarily, it is the pressure upon them, which includes from consumers and also from regulations, to make progress in sustainability and decrease their environmental footprint. The end consumer's sentiment matters, but the dynamics are very different compared to the food space or any kind of consumer packaged goods industry. So I'm just gonna touch on a little bit about brand partnerships, because I think we've established that really brands have a huge role to play here. And I'll focus more on the roles that brands actually play other than just being a buyer. So for example, the picture you see here, Allbirds released this sneaker made with natural fiber welding's next-gen leather called Miram. But also the year before this launch, Allbirds invested $2 million in natural fiber welding. So you see that brands are really playing many different roles in this ecosystem. In October last year, General Motors announced its investment in MicroWorks to secure R&D in developing something for the interiors of GM cars. And then in November, we saw a partnership that really marries the two sides of the spectrum of incumbent and next gen. So some of you might have heard of Echo Leather. So a traditional tannery. It is working with Ecovative, which is a next-gen leather maker, to create leather-like alternatives. So it's awesome to see these like unique opportunity of newcomer working with the traditional and really shifting the industry and the landscape together. Right. So this is the third State of the Industry report we're publishing. So in this one, we're really tackling some controversial talking points, more in-depth insights. So for example, the fashion world has really gone through a year of reckoning in 2022. We talk about the greenwashing crackdown in the fashion industry. We wrote about that in the report. We go into some details about greenwashing, scaling challenges, challenges of innovators and brands working together, etc. So, but I really encourage you to read all these case studies in the report. And just to give you a sense of what it is, these deep dive analysis, for example, they're really interesting stories here. The image you see here on the left is Martin, who worked at MicroWorks before, so reinventing leather using mycelium. But now he has moved on to start his own company to make plant-based fur, but leveraging on existing tanning factory technologies. And on the right is Butcher Bio, which pivoted from purely using fermentation to now a plant-based formula with fermentation as an enabling technology and ingredient. And those learnings and pivoting through overcoming scaling challenges and all the practical reality issues of trying to invent really a novel material. So really encourage you to look into these stories and case studies that we have that look into these industry-wide challenges and how people are trying to solve them. All right, so I'm gonna finish up with this slide for you. Again, this is in the report, so a snapshot of where we are at 2020, by the end of 2022, the state of the industry. I think the message is that the emerging next-gen materials industry continues to grow, and going forward, the greatest opportunities really lie in developing technology and materials that need to have the quality that inherently meet market demand for sustainability, style, and performance. And looking at these numbers, as we've discussed, the input currently are primarily in plant-based. We really look forward to more and more other input and technologies being utilized. A lot of the companies are now focusing on making non-animal leather. Again, very exciting to see the white spaces around silk, wool, fur, and down. We are already seeing more companies going into those white spaces. So looking forward to seeing new companies supporting new companies in the next year. When it comes to investments, yes, 2022 was less exciting, I guess, compared to 21, but again, that upward trend is there. Over $3 billion has been invested since 2013 into this space. So that's very exciting. As mentioned, we have that fundraising database that accredited investor can access. That is how we help bring together fundraising startups and investors and try to accelerate the fundraising process. So we are seeing that there are a lot of interesting companies in that database currently fundraising. So it's all looking very exciting, and technologies and innovation, which is what we focus on at MII, really has the potential to significantly transform the industry. And we cannot stress enough that really quality, the aesthetic, the performance, the price being environmentally preferable and animal-free, like all these need to be checked to really be competitive compared to the incumbents and really shift the market. And so what we try to do here is to try to provide that transparency, that a platform for collaboration, because that is really the basis for creating and shifting to a better future for everyone. So that's it for me, the presentation. Very much encourage you to download the report. If you still haven't, please go to our website I think the link is in the chat. So make sure you download the report and read every word. All right, I'm gonna hand it back to Perry to lead the
Thank
Q&A.
you, Elaine. And I also wanted to remind our participants that we will be sharing a PDF version of this presentation later in the day, and there will be a link to download the report even in the presentation, so they will be able to directly download it from there. Thank you, Elaine, so much for such a wonderful and insightful presentation. I will now be opening up the chat for questions, and we already have received quite a few questions, Elaine, so buckle up. I think one of the first questions that we received, and it's a really interesting one, is that why do most startups only go for B2B rather than B2C for next gen materials? Do you think that B2B models alone will sustain themselves now financially?
Well, I love this question. First of all, thank you, whoever asked that question. I think we covered this a bit, right? On the one hand, because the brands are really the gatekeeper. So if you're just doing the B2B, which is basically most of the material startups that we see are really just doing the B2B and not building the B2C arm at the same time. So I guess the downside of that is that you are reliant on the brands to kind of bring your material to market. That's one thing. But the other thing is, realistically, when you're starting as a small startup, you really need to focus on what you're good at. And it is really, really difficult to build two arms in parallel. One, and the two of them requires very, very different skill set. One is really focused on the technology. So did you start your company because you're technologically very strong, or you're good at building a consumer brand? Like, those are two very different things. But of course, there are a handful of companies doing that. They've been around for longer. Pangaea is a very good example of, like, I think they started more as building the consumer facing brand and then built up a huge kind of material innovation platform in-house and partnering with others. So that's one example. Save the Duck also does both, but again, almost from what we've seen, those are almost the outliers to be able to pull off doing both.
Thank you so much, Elaine. So we have another question from Cassandra Adams, and she asks, what are the drivers behind the slaughter of cows, food, or the use of leather? If it's food, then is using leather still an environmental problem or a way to make best use of byproducts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to start with saying, gosh, there needs to be some serious research. And I mean, this is something that MII is looking into as well. around this topic, because if we stop at just calling something a byproduct and therefore let's just wait for other people to solve their problem, and we're going to continue using this byproduct as long as the other problematic industry exists, well, that's one way to do it. I am naturally a bit biased because I came from the alternative protein space. I have that background. I think the way, at least I would see it, is a business is a full thing. Everything that is from an animal as a commodity, bringing in value, that brings value into the business. And as we all know, animal agriculture, and especially in animal food industry, the profit margin is extremely narrow, extremely low. Every little counts. And for example, so in the case of fish, sorry, that just came out in my mind. In the case of fish meat is not as expensive as fish skin, because fish skin is where the collagen is, and that goes into obviously making different things, including skincare products, etc. So basically, I think the point that I'm trying to get to is that I would look at it from a more holistic way, which is that the business model is the whole thing. And I don't see something as just a byproduct. It all contributed to and interact with, is the animal food industry going to be disrupted first, or is the material industry going to help disrupt both industries, or vice versa, right? It's all interactive. So I think that is how I would look at this issue.
Thank you so much, Elaine. We have another question from Christian Kustra, and she says, I am an engineer with a love for mycelium-based biomaterials. What roles are engineers currently playing in the mycelium material industry? How can engineers like myself enter into the field other than sending unsolicited resumes to companies?
Well, I think a few things. Okay, now this is where I have to say I'm not a scientist, and I wish our CSO is here to take this question. But I think first of all, MII kind of exists as hoping to help with that kind of connection, and have this community and platform, so that you at least know, for example, well, first of all, you can contact us, but also like, the list of companies that are out there. At least if it's a cold call or cold email, you already have the research done for you, and save you many hours of figuring out who's who. But also there are a lot of R&D kind of happening in universities. Again, MII is trying to do more with regard to university outreach and that kind of program, academia program as well. So yeah, I think those are kind of leads that you can go into as well. I think so. Basically, I think the bottom line is that these startups are not going to exist without that CSO or without those like technological stakeholders, right? Like these startups, it's based on the technology. So you have a very important role to play. And if you're passionate about this, we very much encourage you to contact us, cold call those companies and try to get involved. But definitely you're needed.
Thank you so much, Elaine. And I just want to add quickly to this, which is that networking and community building is a huge part of what MII does. And because of that reason, we have an annual flagship conference that we have every year, and it's called the Material Innovation Conference. This year, it's happening on the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd of June. And it's a complete virtual conference. So I would really encourage everybody to register their interest for the conference. And yeah, hope to see you there. Let me take another question, Elaine. So we have a question from Mason Mincy. who says, as more mature startups close series stage funding, does this imply funding will consolidate with mostly larger state, particularly with animal-free alternatives?
Okay, if I understand this correctly, so it means that like funding is going to more the later funding rounds instead of the really early startup.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, the kind of issue we're seeing right now is the opposite, which is there as the industry starts, it's like very much the venture capital funds, the angel investors, even very interested in, and a lot of them are kind of obviously passionate about this space and mission driven, etc. The checks that they write are for pre-seed, seed, for venture capital as well. Like we are almost seeing there to be a funding gap, and I've been to like SynBio conferences. That's all they talk about, which is that gap where beyond say Series B, and then there's just like who are there to fund you. So I wouldn't. I mean, I'm more worried about that, which is like who's going to fund the scale up more than like, is there any money left for the really early startup? Because I think the players are different. So they're not really competing for funding per se. Yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. We have another question from Courtney Cruzan. She says that we're looking for 4 pillars of next-gen materials. One, which is bio-based. Second, textile to textile / circular. Third, biodegradable. And 4, cellulosic. With leather being the first material opportunity, what next process do you forecast to be the earliest adoption on the market for brands to scale, meeting price and consumer adoption mostly?
Now, given again, I'm this is a huge topic, obviously, and I think different people and organizations have different focuses, and I can only speak to the focuses that we have, which is the categories of alternatives to animal-based materials that I talked about. Again, I see a lot of opportunities in all the other white spaces. So silk, wool, fur, down, and we're already seeing some very exciting companies coming through. The interesting interaction between, as I mentioned, this is fundamentally just reinvention of protein, right? So basically, again, it is not just about fashion or just about like, it is across the board when these, especially these technologies that are so versatile and can disrupt multiple industries at the same time, can become product that feed into the food system, that is food industry, that feed into the fashion industry. I think it is really these like technological breakthrough that are super interesting. And yeah, so that's what we focus on. So I think I can only speak to that, but there are definitely a lot of white spaces. And yeah, personally, I would just be excited about technologies that are very versatile. Yeah, and that's where I see the most exciting development happening. But when it comes to the scale up challenges, yeah, I should address that as well. Now, it's really hard to say what would happen first. Again, I think because if we just focus on the fashion industry, because the supply chain, how things are made, is so complicated and also very not very transparent. Very hard to predict which one will happen first, etc. But what I would say is, as an ecosystem builder, we need to think about where to drive the funding, where to drive our effort. There will be kind of short-term solutions, longer-term solutions. for example, a lot of people would say certain technologies that would take a long time. Do we just discard that? Do we just like go for the short-term solutions, which are okay, more doable, but then it's not exactly competitive with the incumbents, either its price, right, or it suffers in terms of quality, etc. So I just think that it's not one thing or the other. Basically, in parallel, we need to work on all of these things. Some we like it's a quick fix, requires a bit of compromise or sacrifice from the customer and consumer, and they would only tolerate that for that much, really. And so the really longer term, as of now, more expensive, doesn't work kind of solution that will get to price parity, let's say in 10 years, we still need to work on those because yeah, so yeah, I think it's not a choosing one or over the other, but we all need to work on different solutions. Oh, I think you're muted, Perry.
Sorry, yes. So I said, thank you, Elaine. I think you answered that really well. We had two more questions on the same topic, and I think your answer really encompasses the question that they were asking. There's a question from Xenia. She says, do you consider any recycled plastic-based fibers yarn to be next-gen materials? If yes, in which cases? It seems page 5 to 6 of the report puts them under current-gen materials, but page 8 on the report has a visualization where those are included.
I'm thinking
That's
which is page 5. Yeah. I think the confusion is okay. When we say current gen,
sorry, Elaine, do you want to go back to the slide? Slide?
I think the pages is the pages in the report, not the slides, right?
But we also have a slide explaining the differentiations. I think it would be good to pull it up right now.
Good idea. Okay. Sorry, I need to. Bear with me. Getting there.
Yeah.
This one.
Yes.
Yes, I would say we call something current gen mainly when it's a virgin plastic, virgin PVC, virgin PU, and then the recycled plastic would go under next gen. Yeah, if that makes sense. But to be completely honest, yes, we are less focused on recycled material being the input. We're more focused on the other input categories, mainly because we're focused on innovation, so creating novel materials. Yeah, so that's just our focus.
Thank you, Elaine. So I think we are almost at time. I will take one more question and then we can close the webinar. So let me just take one more question. There's a question that the dependence of big companies for startups to thrive is still high. Do you think that's a drawback to innovation? And if yes, how to tackle that challenge?
Sorry, I didn't get that too. Can
yeah,
you
so the question is, the dependence of big companies for startups is still very high. Do you think that it's a drawback to innovation? And if yes, how to tackle that challenge?
Is it a drawback? Well, I guess where I would focus on is, first of all, honestly, it is what it is that the material, you have to work with a brand to turn it into a bag, right? So it is what it is, that process. Again, someone obviously the first question that we had is like, why don't we just do it all, right? The B2B, the B2C, build the material, also build the brand, make the bag, and all, just own it all. We've talked about how, that can be very difficult, but of course that is a way to do it too. I think given what the reality is, what we also at MII would focus on is support that collaboration between brands and startups, because brands need these materials, and we're already seeing them investing in these startups and like being open to co-development because they know this is the future. And it really takes the two together to figure it out, because being a material innovator, it does not mean you have that full range of design capacity, like the knowledge with the supply chain, the suppliers, the machineries, etc. So it is really hard to avoid that, basically. So might as well try to figure out how to work with and tap into the deep pool of resources that these brands have, which is not just the money, but also the expertise. And honestly, they know best. Like if they have been working with, say, cow leather for decades, they are the best judge of whether the new material is good enough, is competitive enough, is workable in the industry, right? To even disrupt the industry. So yeah, I would really encourage startups to look at them as partners. Yes, because that is a great pool of resource. And again, MII is here to kind of facilitate that connection, facilitate making those deals happen. So yeah, I'm just gonna plug again. We're gonna have that brand report coming out in a few months. So yeah, we're working on that. Definitely seeing that again as a gap that need to be filled, and to help with those collaboration, making them happen.
All right. Thank you so much, Elaine. We will close the question answer round now. And again, I want to thank you all for joining us today for this extremely informative and thought-provoking webinar. I hope you found the presentation engaging and that you gained understanding of the subject matter. Again, I just want to remind everyone about the conference that we are having on the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd of June. It's called the Material Innovation Conference, and you can register your interest by clicking on the link that my colleague Kara will share with you in the webinar chat. And yeah, Elaine, I would like to extend a special thank you to you for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. We look forward to hosting more such events in the future. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any feedback or suggestions. And thank you again, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.